I'm also terrified of middle schoolers.
Welcome to Game Theory and Money, our conference championship edition. We will look back on the divisional round, look forward to the championship game Sunday, and sprinkle in a little conversation with a punter. That's right, you are going to be entertained by that because, darn it, if we don't get a whole lot of analytics mixed into that conversation that Cynthia had with Brad Nortman, the punter for the Jaguars. It's Cynthia Frelund, the star of our podcast. She and her big brain with her predictive analytics degrees and methods that use 10,000 simulations to help you understand what's going to happen using math in these upcoming games in which two teams will participate in the Super Bowl. Cynthia, why don't we begin with what happened in the divisional round? You went 3-1. I went 2-2. Both of us missing out on the Pittsburgh game. But before we get to that, why don't we start with the one we split on that gave you that 3-1 record and me the 2-2, and that is the Eagles defense overcoming the experience of the Falcons. And I guess the big question is, what do we figure out about Nick Foles, if anything?
Well, he was productive and efficient in the short passing game, which I guess that's not anything new. We saw a lot of RPOs. We saw a lot of throws behind or at the line of scrimmage. It was very conservative play calling, and we saw that he really leaned on that defense to carry him over the edge. That was kind of the recap of all of it.
The one thing that we had, well, not one thing, but what we had going into the game against the Rams, and certainly proved to be true, was A, this is a great defense against an inexperienced quarterback. They took advantage of that. And B, this is an experienced offense with a heck of a weapon in Julio Jones, a competent run game, and most importantly, the ability to convert on third downs, and that's what went awry.
That weapon with Julio Jones, though, something interesting. He was, in terms of end zone, so touchdown targets, 1 of 18 on the season.
Well, the season wasn't great. The game against the Rams was pretty darn good.
That one was
for Julio,
good, right?
So that's kind of what we figured.
Kind of like what we saw at Tampa Bay.
Right. It's all right. It was a bad season, but now that the playoffs are here, you lean on your strengths, and Julio was certainly a strength in that game against Los Angeles. But I think more than anything, it was the fact that they could not convert third downs. 4 of 13 when this was the number one team in the league all season long, converting darn near 50% of their third downs. Was it bad play calling? Was it, and you certainly, we always lean toward blaming somebody instead of rewarding, a group. Was it the Eagles' defense, or was it just poor execution?
Eagles' defense third in third down percentage on the season. They're actually excellent at blitzing in this game, something they've done all season long. And Matt Ryan was uncharacteristically bad against the blitz in this game. Further, the erratic play calling, that's what I'm going to call it, that's something we've seen from Sarkisian all season long. It's not new in this case, so really, it kind of came down to that, Matt Ryan, that, they were inside the 10, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, if you have that offense with those weapons and you're inside the 10 with a goal-to-go situation, first and goal-to-go from the 9, you would assume that it's going to work out. This is the interesting thing about Sark, though, right? The offense was never going to perform at the level it did the season before. I mean, that was a historic outlier of a season.
Even if Kyle Shanahan was there, it wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, but and guess what? We're not having these conversations if Matt Ryan throws a better ball on first down.
Right.
Because that was the down. It was the matchup they wanted, the one-on-one with Ronald Darby and Julio Jones, and pass just sailed on him. And you wonder if that was a 50-50 ball, like we've seen so many times in his career, if Julio Jones comes down with it and everybody's not hemming and hawing about Steve Sarkisian being brought back to be the Falcons offensive coordinator.
And, we have to give a little love to Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham because their pressure was just so visible.
You know what was odd about that? Well, I shouldn't say it was odd, but it wasn't like Fletcher Cox was any more disruptive than Aaron Donald was. I mean, it was very similar, right? Where that just interior of the line was not able to keep Matt Ryan comfortable, or I should say, at least give him enough time to throw. Aaron Donald did the same thing. For whatever reason, it just happened to work better against the Rams defense than it did.
I think they also had two, right? Like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. And then, I mean, look, Darby and Mills, so Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby, those were matchups that they wanted to exploit. They are, 30 or worse per PFF in terms of cornerback rankings. But in this game, they actually allowed a sub 70 passer rating. So it's part, chicken and egg here, right? It's Matt Ryan throwing poor balls and them defending well. So, you have the two, we talked about this, multiple pressures, and then the cornerbacks on the back end that can really defend it. It's a really strong recipe for winning.
The other Saturday game really doesn't need much.
Boring?
Yeah.
Boring?
I mean, it was, great. The Titans got the 7-0 lead, and I'm sorry, Mike Munchak, but it was not one of the most egregious calls. Was it a bad call? Yeah, the offensive pass interference on Eric Decker. When you lose essentially 35-7, the last touchdown was with almost no time left. You can't say that really changed the outcome of the game. I guess, and we'll get to projecting that forward. Anything else jump out at you from that game other than the Titans were completely outclassed like many of us thought they were going to be? Right?
Right. Well, okay, there's two things that were positive signs spinning it forward to this week, but something to note. You saw Tom Brady adjust to shorter, quicker passes, something he's going to need to do against the Jags. All three of his touchdowns were sub 2.5 seconds in terms of time to throw, which is lower than his season average, which was up over 2.6. I know it sounds like a tenth of a second isn't a lot, but in terms of time to throw, it is. And also, his season average of 9.5 yards, he was like under 7 in this one. So we saw him make the adjustment to counteract the pass rush, something that he's going to need this week.
All right, to the Sunday games and the early contest, which was as odd as anything we would
well, you
have.
didn't think there was going to be 87 points in this game?
I mean, if
No?
we said the Jags were going to win, we would have assumed it was going to be like a 13-3 kind of deal, right? That they were able to dominate time of possession, create some turnovers, lean on a run game. Instead, they end up winning. And look, the score isn't nearly as indicative of what we saw in that game. I mean, they were up 28-7. So what happened to that? I guess the best thing, because it wasn't there was a fumble, scoop, and score, but that was only 7 of those 45 points. 38 of them were on offense. So what happened to that Pittsburgh defense?
And I'm looking into their base package, so their base defensive personnel, 3-4-4 is what they run in their base. Without Shazier, they added 0.2 yards per play against the run. That was kind of the beginning of what we saw happen because that forced them into the unfavorable fourth downs and improbable, like how Ben Roethlisberger, can make those fourth and 15s turn into touchdowns, but 4th and 1, they're not converting those. It's some improbable things happen. But really, it really started about, without Ryan Shazier in their base defense, adding 2 yards per rush on average more was the start of the end, in my opinion.
And moving forward, well, first I'll look back because people are saying why is Jalen Ramsey puffing his chest out when
because that's what Jalen Ramsey does, though.
Yeah, when the Steelers scored 42 points, but and I think this is something you can probably explain better than I. But when you talk to people that are involved in strategy-based games, be it chess or poker or whatever, they will tell you when they play an opponent that has no tendencies, that has no script, it's very hard. They're better off playing against the second best player in the world when they know kind of what's coming and try to stay as mentally focused as possible. The Steelers' offense essentially became that player that you don't know what to do with because they fell behind so badly, and just like you said, they're running
Vance
4th
McDonald
and 15s.
Was performing in the slot better than Juju Smith-Schuster. That's not something
it wasn't
probable.
an offense that they had ever seen or tendencies that they had ever seen because they were in such dire straits. So it's hard to say, well, maybe the Steelers showed you something on that Jacksonville defense that the Patriots can exploit. No, they were down 28-7 and had absolutely nothing working.
You will not see Tom Brady needing to try to make and force these throws in very horrible downs and distances like you saw in that game.
And
you just won't.
Quickly before we move on, not that this has anything to do with analytics or our podcast, but for all the folks that are putting together clever Twitter statistics about Todd Haley what is – hey, look, Big Ben doesn't like him. That's it. That's what we've heard for years now.
Analytics take. Yeah, Ben doesn't like him.
Does not like him. It is clear
the
that
I hate you factor.
The two had issues, and their personalities clashed. They're both very stubborn, bullheaded guys, and
it's a lot easier to replace an offensive coordinator than it is a franchise quarterback.
When you got a guy who's in his 15th season, going into his 15th season, and he doesn't like the guy, it's probably, regardless of what the statistics say, not a good thing moving forward. So that's why he got fired. Thanks for all the statistics about the top 3 offense and all these categories. doesn't matter.
And to play off of that, all the A.J. Boye, like, oh, we saw him be exploited in Jalen Ramsey. No.
It's Antonio Brown,
and
it's
the weird situations.
Yeah,
too,
that's exactly the
still
strategy
shut
thing.
Down corner. Stop it.
All right, to the one of the great ends.
Yes, I didn't think it was going to get any better than the Jags and Steelers game.
Yeah, it turns
and
out,
then it did. Well, in the second,
or
half.
At least yes, from
the
the
first half
mid-third quarter on.
Nap time.
Vikings defeat the Saints on one of the greatest endings to a playoff game we have ever witnessed.
Insane.
And I think
jaw-dropping.
Yeah, you know what? And just to kind of look back at what we were just discussing with the Jags and the Steelers, 17-0 lead for the Vikings defense, I do think is indicative of how dominant that defense is. And then you get into desperate situations, and you had an uncharacteristic turnover, or maybe it is a characteristic turnover because it's Case Keenum throwing the ball, that really kind of played into that game sliding in the Saints' direction. Because desperation does change things dramatically, and clearly that's what happened in that second half adjustment for the Saints.
And I got a lot of crap about this Michael Thomas take that I have, that he's right up there with the elite. He showed you in that game.
Yeah, in the second half.
In the second half of that game.
That's where Drew Brees went when they needed things to happen.
And they happened, too. So
yeah.
That was a big one. So when we looked back at, producer John had me look back at some of the miracle wins lead to letdowns the following games. And obviously, Music City, Miracle, whatever. Titans beat the Bills, but then they lost in the Super Bowl. Basically, what I looked into is what happens kind of, after these incredible immaculate reception, everything. And the teams really haven't necessarily won, but then when you put it into context, the immaculate reception, they didn't go on to win the Super Bowl. So when you look at it and put it into context, it's kind of like the reason that it's a miraculous win is because sometimes it's not it's usually like an underdog overtaking someone who was supposed to win, as opposed to two pretty evenly matched teams and then a miraculous win. So the Vikings and Saints game is pretty evenly matched teams. That probably could have been our NFC Championship, game potentially, depends on seeding, but that it's not usually as evenly matched. And typically those are contested calls or someone has beef with it going, afterwards. But in my opinion, these are just fun ones to watch. We're lucky to have it, and it doesn't necessarily lead to a letdown.
Yeah, I saw.
You can look to some stats on that. But
I saw a note that said, I believe it was in the last 15 years, because the Music City Miracle would have preceded that. That teams that win on walk-off touchdowns are 0-5 the following week.
I think it's 0-6. Yeah.
And
and you're right, but but then if you put that in context, it's in part because those teams are. It'd be Jacksonville having a miraculous win over the Patriots this week. The way we think about that, this one's supposed to win by a lot. This one's an underdog. They win in a miracle, and then they're still kind of an underdog going forward.
Yeah, and I guess the problem with that statistic is that I believe the way it was worded is that it was walk-off, right? So it is the last play of the game.
I don't understand that really. Yeah.
Because all you got to do is just kind of think back to the Ravens run in 2012 to the 2013 playoffs.
Yes.
And
the only AFC team in the last 10 years who isn't a 1 or 2 seed to make it to the Super Bowl and win.
And won, and that was on that remarkable play, the Joe Flacco bomb. And I'm not going to mention the safety's name because I like him a lot, and he's a local guy and a UCLA guy, so we'll just leave it at that. But not a walk-off, but still essentially a walk-off. All right, so those are the divisional rounds. Let's think about moving this forward.
Let's do it.
Case on a deep drop, steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side, caught by Diggs. Stay up. Oh, he got loose. Oh, my God. At the 30. No 10. Way. Touchdown. Are you kidding me? Miracle finish. It's a Minneapolis miracle. Stefon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings have walked off on the New Orleans Saints. It's a 61-yard Minneapolis miracle.
Well, the aforementioned walk-off. There it was, the Stefon Diggs. Remarkable play, and you can blame a safety. You can celebrate Case Keenum and Stefon Diggs.
I'm not blaming the safety. I don't like that take. I actually hate that take. But
really?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Because he's okay.
There's just so many.
If he would have gotten PI there, they would have kicked a field goal, and it.
But I don't think it was PI. I think what he was doing was what so many football players, and this is kind of something that we talked about, and one of the reasons why we like the Vikings so much is they're just sound tacklers, and that, believe it or not, it's ridiculous as that may sound, there is such a dearth of sound tackling in the NFL for whatever reason. Guys that don't use their fingers as much as they should, that don't wrap up and just tackle, but are always going for the splash play. They want to sack, they want to tackle for loss, and that's how guys, like Eric Kendricks slipped to the second round because all they do is make tackles, and there aren't giant sack numbers, but that's so important, and that's what was so obvious about that. Is here is a safety that is trying to cut the legs out from a guy instead of just wrapping him up and bringing him down, because that's what so many of them do in 2017/18, as opposed to 10 years ago when you wrap that guy up and you bring him down, the clock runs out. Now maybe you got a battle and he's going to push you forward and get out of bounds and attempt a 50-yard field goal. And look, it's not on Marcus Williams. It's or Patrick Williams or Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams. Yeah, jeez,
you're fine.
Confusing my Williams or Kyle Williams, or it's not on Marcus Williams entirely. It's on the alignment of the defense. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. So dependent just on that one guy. But again,
silly.
Here we are, Eagles and Vikings.
Eagles and Vikings. Talk about two teams who are really good at preventing yards after the catch, yards after contact, tackling, wrapping him up, playing old school football. That's
you
teams.
talk to people that played football in a Wobegon era, back in the
Wobegon got into the pod
50s through the let's say the mid 50s through the mid 70s, and they will tell you the goal of a team was to prevent forward progress. Believe it or not, it was not to score more points from your opponent, it was to prevent your team from forward progress, and that's what these two teams do. They are dominant defenses with capable offenses. So what happens when two dominant defenses take on one another, Cynthia?
Well, with a 54.1% confidence, meaning not a strong confidence, I have Minnesota coming out on top 23-22.
By the slimmest of margins.
By the slimmest of margins.
Why? What led you to the 1 point advantage for Minnesota as opposed to the Eagles?
I'm going to talk about forward progress here for you.
Let's go.
Third down. So Minnesota's offense went from third best to 27th since Week 15 when they lost their quarterback. However, both defenses, Minnesota ranks number 1 on third down defense, Philadelphia number 3 on third down defense in the regular season, and they both finished with top 10 rush offenses, and they both finished with the number 1 and number 2 rush defenses. Who's going to move forward? I think it's going to be the Vikings a little bit better.
Just by a smidge.
Just by a smidge.
How much of that is on Case Keenum and him being a pretty darn good quarterback this season, whether it's completion percentage or just lack of turnovers? I mean, I know he's Case Keenum, and he's 30 years old, and we're finally celebrating him, but it's very hard to argue that Nick Foles has had anywhere near the type of impact that Keenum has had for the Vikings.
It's not even close. One of the cool ones that I've really looked into is the deep passing completion percentage on 20-plus air yard passes. Case Keenum has a 40% completion percentage, and Nick Foles 13.3. That kind of shows you the difference in style. Like that one stat encapsulates kind of like what you're seeing the differences are. So Foles with the RPOs, we talked about the line of scrimmage throws, like keeping his completion percentage high. That's how last game they got him to be so efficient and effective and not turn the ball over. So not turning the ball over, both of these quarterbacks benefit from running back situations that are keeping them in games and minimizing turnovers. Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon were kind of a surprise, whereas, Nick Foles has the benefit of Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount, and Jay Ajayi with the yards after contact really help him, and that, midseason acquisition really are going to help him, if they're going to have a chance to overtake the Vikings.
I'm trying to wrap my head around a team or either of these teams scoring more than 20 points, just because you'd have to believe that the game plan is going to be very conservative, just because of how good the defenses are. So I don't know if it's a punter game, if it's you know what I mean, if it's just field position, and this ends up being a Kai Forbath sort of, hey, he's going to make 5 field goals to, I think it's Jake Elliott, right? Is their kicker?
Jake Elliott.
To Jake Elliott's
who
4.
Makes like 6
that's
really
what I mean.
Long, like 600, right? Like 600-yard ones.
I think that's kind of what I'm envisioning, right? Is very similar to what we saw against the Falcons, like a 15-10 or a 17-14, just because neither team is going to want to put their offense in a position to give the game away. And I wonder if that's kind of what we're going to see. And because it's hard to envision either of these offenses with the pieces they have. I mean, look, it's not just Case Keenum, right?
Nope.
There's no Dalvin Cook. It's a backup running back. I mean, it's an offensive line that kind of has been, it has managed to coalesce throughout the entire season for Minnesota, and whether or not they're going to, Pat Shurmur's going to throw this thing around, and there's going to be a chance to score 23 points.
So maybe you have some recency bias here, because last week, Case Keenum under pressure wasn't what we've seen all season long. During the regular season, I think he was pressured on something like 40% of his dropbacks. It's the third highest pressure rate. And he was sacked on only 10% of them. And if you look last game, his passer rating under pressure was like 6. And literally
6.
Literally 6.
Yeah.
Which in the regular season, it was much higher. He was I'm not going to say, great he had the best passer rating under pressure. And part of that, and the reason I hesitate to say great under pressure is because you're not seeing super deep passes in this situation. You're seeing game management type situations. But so maybe last week you saw something different than you're used to with Case Keenum. You saw them get to him a little bit more. Case Keenum was number 7 in the regular season against the blitz. Philadelphia is best in the season and the best in the postseason when they blitz. So about a 94, or he went from a 99.9 passer rating in the regular season, and the Philadelphia Eagles allowed a 58 passer rating against the blitz. So you're right. You have in my opinion, you're flagging the right things, but I do think that what's going to happen in this game is that Minnesota's going to lean on their running back. Since week 10, only Mark Ingram has more rushing touchdowns than Latavius Murray. If you look at the Stefon Diggs outside the numbers, he has the 3rd best passer rating outside the number, and Philadelphia's 7th best passer rating allowed outside the numbers. They are susceptible to the deep ball. And I feel like if you look at the matchups with like Jalen Mills and like where's Adam Thielen, is he going to get Patrick Robinson's really great slot corner, but if he gets maybe Darby, or if he gets a good matchup that then it gets split with Jalen Mills, then this could be that those deep passes are kind of how you see those home run balls.
Yeah, the one thing that and you mentioned the pressure he was under last week, and it was end pressure. It was Sheldon Rankins, and It was Cameron Jordan. That's what makes playing the Rams or the Eagles so much different. Is it's just not pressure that you're used to. You defensive tackles like Aaron Donald, like Fletcher Cox, just kind of change everything. And it's not that Case Keenum's not mobile. I mean, he can move enough, but he's more of a guy that's going to climb the pocket when that pressure comes and deliver those underneath routes, or find someone like Thielen or Kyle Rudolph or Jerick McKinnon, as opposed to, spinning out, which is what he's probably going to have to do, and rolling and cutting off half the field because it's going to be flat. And that's why everyone's like, why is he rolling Matt Ryan to the right on that 4th and go? Well, what do you think happened to make him have to roll right? I mean, you've got one of the best pass rushing, defensive tackles that pushed him out of the pocket. So
they have the most total pressures in the regular season as a team, the Eagles do. So, of course, it's going to come from every direction.
So that's what will be interesting. It'll be a different type of pressure, and how Keenum is able to respond to that. But, and that's just been all – I mean, look, Adam Thielen's an all-pro. I mean, he is an all-pro receiver. You saw that ridiculous catch he made to extend that drive. And granted, there was PI and holding and all that on it, but he still made the catch. I mean, the completion was still there, and that's what extended that drive. So he does have very capable top-shelf pass catchers that he is relying on as well. They may not be.
Let's not forget Kyle Rudolph, who only dropped 1 pass in the entire season.
That's what I mean. So
it's ridiculous.
It's not Julio Jones, but it is. Adam Thielen's hands are sound. He's very good. Stefon Diggs shows you what he's capable of having. Like, the idea that the guy didn't just step out of bounds is, but had the mindset to look upfield and see that there was no one ahead of him.
Good.
Yes, so he has got really good pass catchers to lean on when that pressure comes, and I think that's part of the reason why that number was so good throughout the course of the season.
And if you talk about like pressures coming from multiple sides, the Vikings defensive front, it's kind of this, they're very similar in those types of ways. The Vikings defense allowed a passer rating of 39.5 when they create pressure on opposing quarterbacks. It's the 2nd lowest in the season, including the playoffs. And look at Nick Foles. So when he has less than 4 seconds, so these short passes, his passer rating is 93. When they force him to take
4 seconds, might as well be 40, right?
Right. When it's more than 4 seconds, his passer rating is 5.
That's weird.
the point is the deep pass is letting it play out. That's going to be a problem in this one.
Oh, wait, when it's less than 4 seconds.
When it's less than 4 seconds.
I was like, wait a minute.
93.
When he's got all this, what happens? His brain gets in the way and he just starts freaking out because he's got so much time? I got you. When it's less than 4 seconds, he's got a passer rating of 5.
No. The opposite. So when it's less than 4, so he's just throwing these short passes, line of scrimmage or less. So it's get rid of it, designed, screen, bubble. Think.
All right, I'm an idiot. Let me get my head around this.
No, you're good.
When Nick Foles has time to throw, he's terrible.
Yep.
How about that? That's a good little nugget there.
And the Vikings, if you look at their defense, they have the 3rd best passer rating on throws that take place in under 4 seconds, and the 8th best in terms of.
So they saying like Everson Griffin should just kind of take a knee and go, "Hey Nick, what do you got?" So I'm just gonna stand here. I'm not gonna. Let's see what happens there, bud. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Go on, give it let it rip. All right, what else? Sorry, I kicked you off track here.
No, I love it.
What else we got?
Well, the other you're just cracking me up today.
Well, it's an odd stat. Wouldn't you say that's an odd stat? I mean, the fact when the guy has time to throw, he's terrible. It's usually not the case. But I see what you're saying. They don't want him throwing downfield,
and they don't want
he's
him.
He's actually got a pretty big arm.
It's not about the big arm. It's about the situations, right? Letting everything unfold, figuring out his maybe check downs, things of that nature, getting outside the tackle box. Have
you ever heard the story of why the Eagles ended up with Nick Foles? By the way, how like that quarterback was drafted. So, well, number one, they wanted Russell Wilson, and they assumed he was going to last to their pick in the 3rd round. They were very surprised when the Seahawks took him.
Well, yeah, because the
earlier.
Seahawks had just paid Matt Flynn a whole bunch of money.
Right. So the story goes, and remember Doug Pederson was there with Andy Reid. He was sent to Arizona to do an individual workout with Nick Foles through the draft process. So he shows up, and anyone that's ever been to Tucson knows that you can get these insane torrential rainstorms that will just kind of show up in the middle of the desert like it's sheets of water. So Pederson is lamenting that he's crossed the country. He's sitting out in this parking lot, and he's like, great, I'm going to have to stay here another day or whatever. And then, little knock on the window. You coach? Yeah. All right, let's go. And it was Nick Foles who was ready to go through his workout in this ridiculous storm, and he was good. And Pederson was just, it was like that old football. That's a guy that I want to go into battle with, someone that was willing to go out there in those sort of conditions and throw it around, even though we knew it could reflect upon him poorly. Then it made an impression upon Pederson that this was a gamer of a guy that was, not going to make him stay an extra day, but was willing to go through the workout even if it reflected upon him poorly. And that is one of the reasons why they had that little check mark in the character or grittiness or whatever category you want to say it was when they selected him in the 3rd round. All right.
That's incredible.
A little backstory.
That's
there
a great one.
A little Pac-12 nugget. I'm taking the Vikings, by the way.
You're taking the Vikings.
Yes.
Good.
What else you got?
Okay, so lastly, Eagles running backs, Jay Ajayi especially, the most productive in the NFL on outside runs this season, averaging 5 yards per carry. However, Minnesota on outside runs allows sub 4 yards per carry, 5th best in that metric. So hello, Harrison Smith. I like to get him in as much as possible. And the other thing that's interesting is the nugget about what Minnesota does against opposing tight ends. So Ertz and Burton's plural. Ertz and Burton could have a tough time in the slot. The Vikings defense held opposing tight ends to only a 55 passer rating when targeted in the slot. And further slot nugget here, Nelson Aguilar, you got to go back to your pack.
Sure.
Pac-12.
USC, old Nelly Aguilar.
That's right. He led all wide receivers in touchdowns from the slot this season with 8. In fact, no other guy had more than 6, so 2 more than the next closest. However, Minnesota's allowed the fewest touchdowns to players in the slot this season, only 2, just overall in general.
All right, so we are in concert. We both take the Vikings. We both agree it will be
and I feel like we just need to say the word Xavier Rhodes in this one because he's amazing.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's going to probably match up against Alshon Jeffrey, who he's seen back when Alshon Jeffrey was a Bear. But we're going to say advantage Xavier Rhodes in this one, big time, not only because we've seen in 2 contests last year only like a passer rating of 22 in coverage against Alshon Jeffrey allowed, and also the passes and routes that project to be for Alshon Jeffrey in this one are not the best with the quarterback. Right. He probably would like Carson Wentz.
I guess because we have to figure out how to disagree on something, I just say lower scoring game.
Okay.
You say
I like it.
22, 23, 22, is that what you have?
23, 22.
I'll go 17 because it's not going to be touchdowns. I'll go 15-12. 15-12.
15-12.
To the next one.
Oof, that's a boring game.
45 yards to the 3-yard line. First and goal from the 3. Fournette, the running back. Bunch to the right. Bortles under center. The give to Fournette, running right up the middle of the field toward the goal line. Touchdown! A 3-yard touchdown run by Leonard Fournette has extended the lead at Heinz Field.
Well, there it is. Not a boring game because
Nope.
Leonard Fournette put on a show. And you always hear, well, take away what they like to do best. Bill
my
Belichick
gosh.
yeah, good luck. Good luck. So let's go. Winner, score, why, Cynthia?
I have the New England Patriots coming out on top 29-20 with a 77.1 confidence index.
I so want to take the Jags. I do, just because I've been doing the Blake Bortles is trash, and I don't
Garbage.
necessarily feel like I have to move off of that. And I pulled up some interesting nugs that the people can suck back to figure out whether or not a dominant defense, and that's what this is. Take the 42 points the Pittsburgh Steelers scored out of it. They were up 28-7 because of that defense and that running game. So give me your key stats. What led to 29-20?
So the middle of the field. So when Tom Brady's on offense, what happens in the middle of the Jags defense is really the main difference maker in this one. Opposing quarterbacks had a 52% completion percentage when targeting the Jags outside the numbers. That's the third worst during the regular season, third lowest. So that's not probably going to be a place where, Tom Brady and Brandon Cooks look to really exploit. The slot, for example, where Amendola will face Aaron Colvin, that's probably a more safe option and a more logical option. And then we've got two key factors here. Number one, and the biggest and best in this one, Rob Gronkowski. Not really sure who's going to defend him. I ran the model with linebackers, plural, corner, and the linebacker, because we heard rumors Jalen Ramsey might be on him. I ran the model with Miles Jack on it. Like, every single way that I ran the model, it's still advantage Gronkowski.
Yeah, you can't stop them. I
Right.
mean, there is, as good as they are, I guess.
21 red zone targets. It's 9 more than the next closest guy in his own team.
It'll be interesting if they put Ramsey on him.
I would like to see that.
It really will, because he is big enough.
Can we mic that up, please?
Yes. Maybe that's what happened. Although Gronk does not seem like the kind of guy that's going to be affected by anything that's said to him.
But see, that would be even funnier. Like, someone says something, and you're just like, meh, and
that's
walks
what I
away.
mean. As he said, the fans went bazooka. That's just Gronk, and that's
I know.
There was I remember, and it was a slight because Phil Mickelson can be a chappy dude. But I remember he did a long sit down with Faherty, and he was asked about Dustin Johnson, and he said, I believe. This is essentially what he said. He said, you either have to be really smart or really stupid to play golf and be effective. And he essentially called Dustin Johnson really stupid. And just, and look, he's the best golfer in the world right now. It's impossible to argue that. What he does is insane.
And then he falls off stairs in his spare time. And so maybe he really is
sure,
not
what he
super
did, right?
smart, right?
But I think that's kind of the Gronk thing, right? Is you are so physically imposing that no matter what the opponent tries to do, you allow it to you're a duck. It's water off your back. It's like, whatever. So Jalen Ramsey can bark all he wants, but I'm guessing that's the one guy that will not be the least bit affected. And guess what? That's what we've seen all season. Quarterbacks freak the hell out when they play the Jaguars. They just do. That team gets in their heads. They're a frustrating bunch. They bark a lot. And look, I saw it up close firsthand. I mean, the fact that Phillip Rivers damn near knocked himself out because he was so
that vein on his forehead
lit when Boye intercepted that pass in overtime. And it was just a frustrating day for him all afternoon. And we know that Tom Brady, he can snap and he can freak out. And we've seen it this year, him barking at Josh McDaniels or barking at his players for running the wrong routes. And much like we saw, if the Jags get up early and they can just kind of tighten that a little bit,
we'll talk about that in a second. Early getting up
see.
Versus being down, the difference between them. But I'm gonna here's if you're a Patriots fan, you want to remember like Antonio Brown. So 84% of Gronk's receptions this season have gone for a first down. That's 30% more than the league average. And I kind of like that Jalen Ramsey, like Antonio Brown lit up this secondary. So to me, that's how I remember that stat. 84% of Gronk's receptions, first downs. So that's just ridiculous. And I also looked, like I said, Barry Church, Paul Posluszny, Miles Jack, Jalen Ramsey, combinations, bracketing, I don't see a place where Gronk's 2.4 yards per route run. Remember that our fun new stat, which is the most amongst tight ends, like by I don't know half a yard or
Gronk
more.
Does is the most amongst tight ends.
Exactly. So it's between all of these things and the passer rating target of 118.5 and the fact that the Jacksonville linebackers have the 6th worst passer rating allowed on the season with 108. Like this is just a mismatch of kind of epic proportions in this case.
In the case of Gronk,
yes.
Not in the case of their offense versus
no.
The Jags
in the case, like my point is I'm trying to find who if I'm the Jags defense, how am I attacking Gronk?
And again, that's every week. Every single week, teams try to figure out if they have an answer for Gronk, and guess what? Every single week they fail because nobody has an answer for him. But what about the rest of the defense? What could they possibly? Because look, Tom Brady can't target Gronk every single play and throw to him every single play. So what happens outside
I guess he could.
of the Gronk mismatch?
So, all right, Tom Brady in the regular season, number 1 against pressure and number 2 outside the tackle box. So those two stats are really telling in this case because Yannick Ngakoue and Calais Campbell, each number 7 or better in total pressures on the season. Remember that outside edge pressure, that's what Tom Brady usually gets. He's fine with the outside edge pressure. It's that pressure in the middle that makes him mad and makes him different. So they haven't done that as much potentially in this game. Maybe they get pressure on Brady in a different way because we know Brady's 3-4 in playoff games since 2001 when he sacked 3 or more times. So that's kind of one of those stats where yes, but where's the sack coming from? Right? Is it inside or is it from the outside?
Well, and when you say inside, it's something that we've talked about all season, and that is what is the motivation of Marcel Darius? Because I watched him treat Spencer Pulley like a bag of sand.
Yep.
And just picked him up and threw him around all game. I mean, it was remarkable. If you want to watch, and I know everyone, watch the game tape. If you want to go back and watch the coach's film, just focus on him versus Pulley, and it is just a clinic. And when you think about that Patriots offensive line, we all know Nate Solder and Joe Thuney on that left side. He's the left guard. Yeah, exactly, on the left side. He's going to have to help out the center. So now all of a sudden, and that's what happens with the Jags, is when you have Malik Jackson and Marcel Darius operating at a high level, you have to have help. And you can't help because you have Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue or Dante Fowler. I mean, that's where they make their bones with just that front four, because someone's going to have to help somewhere, and you can't help everywhere. And that's what's going to be interesting, like you said, if you get that pressure with Jackson and Darius up the middle, and how that's going to affect Brady, who's used to just moving 1 or 2 steps inside that pocket when there is nothing there inside that pocket for someone that is totally immobile at this point in his career, save being able to navigate that pocket with extreme precision.
Totally. So you talk about pocket and time. 6 of Brady's 8 interceptions this season came on throws when he had to hold onto the football for longer than 3.1 seconds. So maybe to neutralize some of this pass rush and the fact that it's coming from all sides and what Darius could do, and not just the edge guys but the guys in the middle as well. You think about how you throw short passes to running backs in this situation. So the Jags have the stingiest passing defense. We can go like a million stats on that. Yards per game is probably the most encapsulating one in that one. But they have the 3rd highest rate of their catches that come off passes to running backs in the league. So 24% of the yards they allowed came off of short passes to running backs. That makes sense because 19 of the Jacksonville Jaguars' 21 interceptions came off passes of 10 or more yards. So if you're looking at 10 or fewer, then you look to see, well, how do the Patriots running backs do on short passes,
Very
10
well.
or fewer yards? Yeah, all 3. So Burkhead, who's back, Deion Lewis, and James White all have over 100 passer ratings in these short, kind of quick release, neutralized pass rush situations. So leaning on them. Now, which one? Let's roll a dice and see what happens. But, I mean, Deion Lewis is one of the most elusive, forcing missed tackles backs in the league. So we've seen him kind of prove it. So that would be my best guess if you were thinking about it for fantasy. But again, it could easily be Burkhead or it could easily be James White in this situation.
I mean, it was the approach that the Chargers took, just because that's the game that I obviously was at and watched. It was an Austin Eckler game, and he had a monster of a game. Yep. I mean, he had a receiving touchdown. He had all those passes in the flat, and that's how they attacked him. And it was very effective. The guy had, I think, 150 combined yards, and most of it was because of those short passes, and then those set up the runs. And that's what will be interesting. If the Patriots use those short passes to then run the ball a lot more than we're used to, because what's the best way to neutralize a pass rush? You run right at it.
Right.
So that's going to be an interesting bit of strategy in how they navigate that. But the Jags offense is really the question mark. We know that defense is going to give the Patriots fits. It just is. It gives everybody fits.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they score points? Because we certainly saw them exploit a Pittsburgh defense that was cut to shreds by Leonard Fournette early in that game.
So Leonard Fournette's interesting because his yards after contact, actually, it was my note here was that Dion Lewis has almost a full, like 3/4 of a yard more yak average than Fournette, which is kind of like I was surprised. That one kind of surprised me a little bit, just because I think of Fournette breaking tackles, but Dion Lewis breaking tackles even more. So the interesting note on Fournette in this one, obviously, let's hope he's completely healthy. I mean, between a minor car accident and what looked to be an ankle tweaking.
He's been nursing that ankle since week 7, about 6 weeks. I think since week 8 when he got that high ankle sprain. So, but they did a very good job of kind of not leaning on him for about a 4 or 5 week period there.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, you got to go with T.J. Yeldon instead of Fournette, and that changes things.
But the combination of the two have been effective. However, so if you look at the Patriots defense, you'll see that running backs, who've finished in the top 10 of rush yards this season, averaged over 95 rushing yards per game and 6.4 yards per carry against the Patriots all season long. That's based on end of the year season rush yards, and then went back and see how they did against the Patriots.
They allowed nearly 5 yards per carry.
Yep, 4.7, second worst in the NFL.
Yeah.
However, you got to look at after their bye, the Week 9 bye. So, looking at the second half of their season, and then if you look at the past 3 games, so after the bye, they became about average compared to the league, right? They started off real bad.
Darn near dead last.
Yep, they started off horrible.
Yeah, you think about Kareem Hunt.
Yep, and then, look, Kareem Hunt's outlier information make that average even crazier, right? So you got to kind of segment the season. And then if you look over the past 3 games, they've only allowed 3.2 yards per carry. That's a significant improvement. So if you look at, it kind of follows like the rest of the trajectory of the Patriots defense this season, right? Since, in September, they were no good on defense. And sorry, come at me, any Patriots fan, all you want. When you're allowing that many yards per game, then I can say that your defense is no good. But since then, they've been, most sacks per game, fewest points allowed, like red zone touchdown percentage, like everything's top 10 since then. So they've turned into the Patriots that we thought that they were.
Yeah, I'm more interested in and I don't want to say it's having recency bias, but yeah, give me a sample size of the last, if you want to give me the last 8 games,
yep.
I'm more apt to buy into that than a season-long number.
Correct.
And also the other thing with their rush defense, they don't allow a lot of touchdowns.
Nope.
So
they don't allow a lot of touchdowns at all.
Yeah.
And they're and in terms of even allowing receptions, they only 4 teams allowed more receptions to wide receivers during the regular season than New England, 5th best at even just allowing wide receivers to catch the ball.
Right.
That's ridiculous. And Blake Bortles, talk about play action, right? About 25% of his dropbacks, 8th highest rate in the NFL. And if you look at what happened with Pittsburgh, he went play action on 54% of his dropbacks. What? Like, that's just crazy. So, and the part of the reason there, look, they're playing from ahead. If you look at when Bortles is playing from 7 or more points, so playing ahead by a touchdown, his passer rating is up over 100 in most situations, blitz, pressure, etc. Only thing there that's kind of a weird outlier is outside the tackle box. It's like under 100, or it's like in the 50s or whatever. He's bad outside the tackle box when they're up by 7. And everything reverses when they're down by 7. The only thing that's better is outside. He can rush when they're down by 7. He can't rush when they're not. It's more about the play call.
So how much does Blake Bortles have to do? So here's the digging that we did and what we came up with.
I love it.
When the Steelers won the Super Bowl with that dominant defense in 2006, Ben Roethlisberger had games with completions of 14, 14, 21, and 9 in the Super Bowl when they defeated the Seattle Seahawks.
Do you want to know his passer rating overall was that? Because I love his passer rating on this.
It was garbage. It was like 20.
22.
You mean in the Super Bowl? Yeah. He threw 2 picks, and so it was bad. But along the way, he had to make some plays. He ended up having kind of like
22.6.
Yeah, one outlier game there. So since we're not in the Super Bowl yet, you wonder what does the player have to do. Rex Grossman with the Bears,
They lost, though.
He had to have his game against the Seahawks in the divisional round.
Correct.
Completed 21 passes, threw for nearly 300 yards. So he had to have that game. The next two, nothing. 11 completions for 144 yards against the Saints. The defense won that game, and then, of course, they lost against the Colts. The Dilfer one is, what's an interesting one? The Tom Brady Super Bowl. The Tuck Rule game and the Super Bowl that they won against the Rams. Mm-hmm. Because he really never had a big game. He had to throw the ball 52 times against the Raiders. But it wasn't like he only threw for 300 yards with those 52 attempts and an interception, no touchdowns. He only completed 12 passes in the championship round and just 16 passes in the Super Bowl. 115 yards of passing in the championship round. That's all Tom Brady had with that defense. And you think about how good that defense was, led by Willie McGinnis, and how dominant it was. Yeah, a little bit, right? And then he passed for just 145 yards in the Super Bowl. The biggest one, though, and it is remarkable when you go back and look at the numbers, what Trent Dilfer did on that path to the Super Bowl in 2000, the 2000 season, 2001 Super Bowl, 9 of 14 in the wild card round for 130 yards. 5 of 16 in the divisional round at Tennessee. Completed 30% of his passes.
But 30% of 16 passes.
Yes. 5.
Right.
The man on the march to the Super Bowl completed, 35 passes in 4 games. He averaged 8 completions a game. That is all he had to do with one of the most dominant defenses the league
But what's the
has
turnover
ever
number
known.
there, right? So it's
yeah, he had 1 interception
right.
in the conference championship against the Raiders. And remember, that was a really good Raiders offense with Rich Gannon that ended up, losing to Brady the following year in the Tuck Rule game, the John Gruden team. He completed 9 passes there for 190 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And then, of course, had that one big pass to Brandon Stokely in the Super Bowl against the Giants that they won 34-7. What I'm saying, I think what we're saying is, Blake Bortles can be trash, in the words of Jadeveon Clowney.
And
He can be trash, and they can still make the Super Bowl, and they can still win the Super Bowl, because that's just how damn good that defense is.
I tried to put together a rule of thumb for us about what your quarterback needs to do if you have a really dominant defense. So if your defense is dominant in terms of pressures, in terms of passer rating allowed, and in terms of scoring, so you've got to have all 3 components, that's worth about 30 passer rating points for the quarterback. So if your quarterback is 30 passer rating points less than the opposing quarterback, kind of look at the both situations, so pressures, scoring, defense, and the ability for them to be what we would call a dominant defense. It's 30 passer rate. We went back over in the playoffs. Now you have to remember, it doesn't really work for the regular season because the strategy is a little different in the regular season, but in the playoffs, 30 passer rating points is the difference.
I would love to take the Jags.
Do it.
But I can't.
Do it.
No, I can't.
Take them.
Come on. I can't
do it.
Can't do it. I've been saying it all season long. Blake Bortles is trash. And that's what's going to come back to bite him. May he prove me wrong. Man, I hope they win, though, so we can get more of those post-game interviews because, God, they're entertaining.
Oh, they're the best.
Speaking of the Jags, let's get to a Jag.
Yes.
Not just a guy, but a Jaguar. Not a Jaguar.
Jaguar.
She will say repeatedly in this interview. But outside of that, Cynthia, what a great conversation here with Brad Nortman.
I'm joined now by Brad Nortman, the punter, and special teams fun. We're going to learn a lot from him on this one. Thank you so much for your time. I can't explain how excited I am for you for this AFC Championship game. The Jaguars, I don't know if, everyone, I guess you guys all thought you were going to be there, but I'm not sure everyone thought that you were going to be there, but we're so happy for you. Thank you for joining us on the pod.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, I can't, in my head, when I think about you, I think about the touchdown passes you've thrown, the fakes you've done, all of the cool, amazing things we've seen you do. Can you explain to us a little bit about what goes into it, prep leading up to these big games?
Well, when it comes to these big games, I try not to approach it any differently than I do any other game, whether it be, preseason week 1 or, week 14 or the AFC Championship game. So for me, it's all about sticking to my process of getting a good mental process with visualization and things like that. And of course, during the week of lifting and my normal physical preparation, and there's a lot of excitement around it, and the stadium's going to be an electric atmosphere, and it rightfully should be. But for me, I just try to take it one day at a time, approach every game like I do any other game, and that way I can be at my best on Sunday.
Awesome. When you do these, like when you install these like special little treats for all of us, like when you're going to pass for a touchdown, and when, all these different things that we've seen, when do you kind of install those? Or like the beginning of the season, in the middle, each week? Is there something specific, game planning? Obviously not going to ask you specifically for the Patriots, but in general, when do you put in these special teams plays?
Well, usually it's week to week. There are some fakes and there are some schemes and fundamentals that we do at the start of the season, and they're sort of with us the whole way. Then each week, you have a game plan against whatever the other team does well, whatever they don't do well, things like that. So we throw in wrinkles that are a little bit different each and every week, and then we've got fundamentals and certain things that are up consistently throughout the year. But usually Tuesday night and Wednesday, like today, are heavy install days as far as what the game plan is, what are the things we're going to do to try to give ourselves success on Sunday, practice them throughout the week. Hopefully they go well, and then go out there and execute. So, it's definitely a process, and, there are things that you do against some teams you don't do against others. So it's what makes, the NFL and football enjoyable and fun and exciting, because there's lots of different ways teams can approach the week and go about the game plan.
Apart from kicking, do you like passing or rushing better?
I would have to say passing, because at least that gets the ball out of my hands, and I'm not really in harm's way for a long period of time. I'm not sure I'm accustomed to taking on hits anymore. So if I could, I had 2 successful fake punts at my time in college, and I've had a successful pass in the NFL. So I guess I'd have to keep on going with the passing momentum, and I would probably say if you could let me sling it back there, I would.
Perfect. So, okay, you brought up college. You went to college in Wisconsin, where it is cold. You've played in warmer weather climates. Carolina sometimes gets cold. Jacksonville sometimes gets a little chilly, but I don't think anyone would call it either of those places cold. What's the difference when you're punting in cold weather climates versus when you're punting in warm weather climates?
Well, you're right. It's a different challenge for each of them. When it comes to cold, the ball will usually get hard. The sweet spot will shrink. It's like kicking a rock out there. So with the cold, and also keeping your body warm on the sideline throughout is a challenge, because, very quickly your muscles and joints tense up. So that comes with a different challenge. On the flip side, the warm weather, some of the early season games, especially both in Carolina and here in Jacksonville, we're talking about games in the 90s, and the heat indexes are well over 100. It's easy to stay warm, but the dehydration sets in and things like that, where I would never have expected that to be an issue. So to continually, take in fluids and to not get too warm, to not wear your body out such that you kick too many punts or do too many things on the sideline. So they both provide an interesting challenge for you, and you have to approach them a little bit differently. So it was a little bit of a transition going from that mostly cold challenge to now mostly hot challenge.
Well, now this week you're going to have a very cold challenge potentially, especially compared to, Jacksonville, right? So what are you going to be doing on the sidelines against the Patriots to kind of stay warm, to keep yourself in that sweet spot?
Well, thank goodness for the heated benches, at least while our team is on defense. So I'll be right there on the heated benches when that's going on. When we're on offense, I usually have a pretty set routine of a certain amount of kicks into the net. I get a couple of snaps with our long snapper, and then just staying ready on the sideline. Just a lot of movement, a lot of shaking my legs and leg swings and things like that, just to keep the blood pumping and to stay warm, because the last thing you want to do is, get a lot of leg lock and, let soreness set in and to try to let your body stop with the blood flow. So just a lot of moving around. Not only does it make you warm, but it helps with the blood flow. So with a cold weather challenge like that, it'll just be staying warm, moving around, and then going out there operating, and then getting back on that warm bench.
Awesome. So what makes this pod different is that we take kind of a numbers and strategy and analytics point of view and help explain football so that people can connect with football a little bit better. And in the case of something that people should know about you is not only were you an accounting major in undergrad, but you also have a master's of finance from 2 fine Big Ten institutions, obviously Wisconsin for undergrad and then Indiana for your master's, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So can you tell us from a strategy standpoint what we should know about punters? How do we see like what you do, and how do we I personally hate the term hidden yards because they're not hidden. There's nothing hidden about them. But can you help us understand like the strategy behind like where are you trying to kick the ball? Where do you want it to go and why?
Absolutely. It is very quantitative, and I think when it comes to boiling down a punter's form, it's very linear. It's very, A to B, B to C, C to D.
You're speaking my language. I love it.
I know. Isn't it? It's very, it's very formulaic, honestly. If you don't do one part of the form correct early, it's going to throw off the whole rest of it. So it's something that I think maybe fans could look back there and just say, oh, it's just punting. But for me, it's very technically savvy, and it's very important to have everything line up, and my form is very linear, and I quantitatively look at my punting, my results, where I'm placing the ball, what the hang time is, where it's located on the field. So there's a lot that goes into it, even from the catch and all the form. The operation time from the snap to the ball hitting my foot is usually 2 seconds or less, so it happens really quick. And if something has gone wrong, usually it falls somewhere outside of where our usual operation time is, whether too long or too quick. And then additionally, getting hang times in the air where the ball is landing for a directional punt. You can kind of divvy up the field into quadrants and of where you're trying to land it.
All these words are making me so happy. They're making me so incredibly happy.
I know. It's something that I think that very few people can get excited about, but I'm glad you're one of them. And so it really is quite technical, and a lot goes into it. But I think maybe a casual fan might not realize, but a lot does.
So when you talk about like not too long and not too short in the air, can you just explain why? Because we all understand like everyone needs to run down the field and all of these things, but like why is that like why not too long? Why wouldn't you want it to be longer?
Well, to that I was speaking mostly about the operation time. So from the snap to me catching the ball. So obviously if you're too quick, usually something has happened with my form that'll probably result in a poor punt. I probably rushed it. But if it's too long, then it creates an opportunity for the other team to come and block it. So usually you're looking for 2 seconds or less. Perfect. When it comes to the hang time, it's I would say the hang time and distance and location. It's kind of like almost like a 3-point triangle that you want. I'd say at least 2 out of 3 to be there. So if you have great hang time and great distance, well, then maybe the location isn't, as important. Or on the flip side, if you have great location on the field of where you're trying to place it and great hang time, then maybe the direction isn't as important. So there are certainly certain things that you try to achieve with any given punt. But for instance, you don't want to go off and rattle a 60-yard punt with very low, 4-second hang time, because that's going to give your coverage team a big challenge for trying to catch the returners coming right back at you. But then again, you don't want it to be too high and too short that doesn't flip the field for you. So there's sort of a sweet spot for any given opportunity. Some punts call for, longer punts. Other ones are more of the pooch punt where you're trying to pin them back inside the 10. So there are certain sweet spots, I'd say, for any given punt, and you're just trying to hit that correlation for all those 3 points to kind of go together nicely.
I love visualizing that. I'm curious, so when I look over your career this season, so of the years you've been in the league, and this is your 6th year, the regular season only, so obviously you played more games this season than you have in the past, so that doesn't count that. But in the past 6 years, this is the most punts you've taken by 10 full punts. So 77 was your high prior to this year, and you're at 87. You were at 87 in the regular season this year. Was there like more fatigue? That's like a half a punt to a full punt more per game. So I'm curious, does that make any? Does that challenge you at all? Is that any different? How does it wear and tear differently?
Well, it certainly can. I think I've done a good job as my career has progressed to be very proactive with my recovery, doing things that I've increased my warm-up to make sure that my body is completely ready to go, as opposed to just going out there and hitting punts. So it definitely can take its toll, but I think I've done a good job at making sure my body is fresh, ready to go. Even something where in practice, where I'm not going out there and just banging away. I have a specific amount of punts I'm looking to hit per practice, per day, and I usually don't vary from that from anything more than 2 or 3 punts, right? So it's the same Wednesday, it's the same Friday, it's the same game day. So it's very predictable, and so that allows me to have potentially a little bit more on Sunday that I'm able to go with because my body is conditioned for that.
Okay, so I can't not ask how it feels to be here right now in this situation. You've been in a Super Bowl before, so just so everyone who's listening remembers, 2015 you were with Carolina, so it's not your first time in having a deep run in the postseason. However, it's a big difference from last year in Jacksonville. This is your second year in Jacksonville, so how does it feel? Like, just talk us through a little bit, like, you know, the swagger the team has, like what everyone, like coming together, anything we should know.
Well, like you said, it's very exciting. When I went through it with Carolina to play in the NFC Championship game, to play in the Super Bowl, you don't know how many times that's going to come around. For some people, it never happens. Great players, they never get to these kind of levels in their entire career. So I'm really trying to enjoy the ride, to enjoy with my teammates. It's very exciting. It's meant to be cherished. But additionally, the way I approach it is not different than any other game. And as far as the locker room is concerned, we knew that we had a good team early on. It was just going out there and earning the respect of the league. And the only way you can do that is by consistently winning. So we've gone out there and we've tried to achieve that. And to get to this level, I don't think anybody's surprised, at least within the building. But we definitely want to continue to go out there and to do our best. Hopefully we can get a win on Sunday and obviously to play a great opponent. But just to continue that climb, because it's something to be cherished, and these opportunities don't come around very much. So you got to take advantage of them when they do.
Okay, so before I let you go, my partner on this pod is Matt Money Smith, and he's also the voice of the San Diego Chargers. And when he was there, when the Chargers play the Jags, he talked to us a lot about Topgolf. And some of the things you were talking about, especially with like the number of punts you try to hit every, on Wednesdays and Tuesdays and stuff, kind of sounds like what golfers try to do. Let me ask you, do you ever go to Topgolf? Do you know what this is about? Because I've never been there. I'm curious. Do you know anything about this place?
Yes, I do. Topgolf it's a fun place to go, but definitely with the numbers and the hitting locations and stuff, that is kind of similar to the punting and the whole thing.
I mean, is it the most fun place to go in Jacksonville, or do you have someplace better that we should go if we're ever there?
It's one of those places that it's got to be up there. It's got to be one of the more fun places I've been to in Jacksonville. It's a great spot. I mean, you got the beach, which is also awesome to go to, but I got to say it's hard to beat Topgolf.
I love it. I just want to point out that really, really loved your My Cause, My Cleats, and it was you did your cleats in honor of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing that. That was so awesome. You want to talk to us about that for just a second before we let you go? Yeah,
that'd be great. Thanks for giving me that opportunity. I grew up with my cousin, who we were virtually best friends, brothers growing up. All throughout when I was in high school, college, he was convinced that it was already a foregone conclusion that I was going to play in the NFL. He's like, nope, got it in the bag, all this kind of stuff, even when I wasn't sure myself. And, unfortunately, in March of 2012, just 2 months before I was actually drafted, he took his own life and was dealing with some mental health issues. So it's something that's very personal, very near and dear to my heart. So to be able to give him a tribute, to wear my cleats for My Cause, My Cleats, and raise awareness for it was something that I felt was very important. Like I said, was close to my heart, and it's a conversation that we need to have more and to bring more awareness to, because it's something that you never think it's going to happen to you until it does. And it comes as a shock for those around them when it happens. And, I just wanted to raise awareness, keep the conversation going, and to shed more light on that issue.
And to bring it back full circle, I believe when you were wearing those, that was when you completed your fake punt pass, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, it was.
I love that.
Yeah, he was with me on that day for sure.
Absolutely, and it was fun. You completed a touchdown pass. Like, everything's great. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck this weekend. We will all be watching. Thank you for explaining to us. I love those 3 points. Like, we're going to be totally looking at that and measuring that as we go forward. Please, if you're, if we get to see you in Minnesota and if you have some extra time, obviously it's a busy time, hopefully for you up there. But if you do, please come on the pod. We'd love to have you in person.
Awesome. Sounds good. I will. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you go. Some math, some science and the fact that you're kicking a rock instead of kicking a nice, soft, overinflated football and trying to sort those things out. Special teams going to be very important for the Jags because if someone, Brad Nortman, who is a very good punter, can help them navigate the field position battle and back the Patriots up with a quarterback who is not very mobile, that could be their path to victory. And you know what I'm going to say to you.
I do. I do.
Shame on you, Cynthia. Of all people. If Nortman's going to put it out there, fine. All right? Fine. Not you. And I'm not even going to I'm not going to repeat it because I don't like it.
Listen.
Not you.
Listen.
Whatever.
San Diego's a great place.
Stop it.
It's a great city.
I'm not going to acknowledge that. Thank you to everybody for listening. We certainly appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We will do our Super Bowl installment of the Game Theory and Money podcast live from Minneapolis. As a matter of fact, we'll both be out there at the site for the Super Bowl, which, according to us, is going to be the Patriots and the Vikings based on Cynthia's projections and, well, my non-quantitative, subjective conversation. If you haven't already, please pass along that you like the pod by doing that and leaving a review. I know it's a little bit of an extra effort, and we just appreciate you listening as it is, but it helps continue to grow the podcast. Anything to add, Producer John? All right, then. Before he was able to even turn up the volume. We'll be back again in 2 weeks, I believe, right, with our Super Bowl pod. What?
I think we're back next week.
For what? Wait, is she going to run numbers on the Pro Bowl?
We'll just have some fun.
I don't have fun. This is not fun for me.
Maybe you need to live a little.
We'll be back again next week. Thank you for listening.